Hello, this is Dr. Moyer. I am an assistant professor at Winthrop University in South Carolina. I used to be employed at Eastern Illinois University up until August of this year. So, Miss EIU, here is a shout out to all my Panther friends. And this guest lecture that I was asked to give by Dr. Betts Hamilton is on statistics in the media, and how we can take the knowledge that we've learned in class and use it for good.
Ben, suppose you're on a game show, and you are given a chance to choose from three different doors, all right? Now, behind one of the doors is a new car. Behind the other two, goats. Which door would you choose, Ben?
I have two, Ben. You have a 17.4% chance of making it straight.
Door number one? Door number one. Ben chooses door number one. All right, now, the game show host, who, by the way, knows what's behind all the other doors, decides to open another door. Let's say he chooses door number three, behind which sits a goat. Now, Ben, game show host comes up to you and says, Ben, do you want to stay with door number one or go with door number two? Now, is it in your interest to switch your choice?
Ha! Is it in your interest to switch your choice? That's actually a common statistical, example that's given to people, and they oftentimes will switch their choice, but really the overall message is don't switch your choice, because before you had a 1 in 3 chance, now you have a 1 in 2 chance of getting it right. So anyways, that was just a little bit of media humor to get us started. So how are statistics portrayed in the media? Of course, the media comes in many formats, so it's I'm not really focusing on any one in particular, but I'm trying to think about what you'll be dealing with as an FCS professional. And usually you're looking at statistics that are portrayed in like a newspaper, or on a website of some sort. And most of the time, the media will use statistics to announce shocking or polarizing findings, meaning they're people on one or the other side of a major issue. And this happened a lot during the campaign for the presidential election this year. So we saw this a lot. Some examples, or an example, more than 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese. And then another example at the bottom, 4 out of 10 women prefer masturbation to intercourse. So, on their own, statistics aren't usually provocative or sexy, but they can be when they are placed in a way that invites us to think about the study and what it means. However, before we can ever take a statistic like that and just run with it, as educated statisticians, we have to know the source. And that becomes very critical when you have a finding of either one of these, the 2/3 of Americans or the 4 out of 10 women. So what becomes important is getting the point that the media is trying to sell something, so they'll pull controversial or provocative findings from the research, from any research, to do that. And as an educated adult, it's your duty to find out what's really going on so that you can help others around you understand as well. So let's take the 4 out of 10 women prefer masturbation over intercourse. And you can see in the previous slide that I cited the author, Wysocki, 2008. And if that's all you had, the implications of this kind of statement are pretty serious. So almost half of women don't prefer sex, they prefer masturbation. If you're attracted to and love women, this could be a major problem. If you're thinking there's really just 1 out of 2 of them will actually enjoy having intercourse with you. Couples therapist might take a statistic like this and alter the way that they counsel couples. And women themselves may not bother investing in improving intercourse with a partner. After all, it's not unusual for most women to, or I'm sorry, not most women, almost 1 out of 2 women to not even like it. So, I could go on and on about the implications, but generally a finding like that can be very damaging in different contexts. So I looked up the source of this statistic. What I found out was kind of shocking. Only 200 people took this survey. Not really clear on how these people were selected. The survey was created on SurveyMonkey, and it was posted on a website hosted by someone that doesn't identify their true identity. They have some sort of username, and he or she is interested in fetishes and sex. So, and he keeps a blog. So he decided to conduct this study. We don't know anything about their credentials. We don't know if they have a degree, if they don't, have they ever done research before. We have no idea because they don't report that. They do report some demographics, that 70% of the people in the study were male and 30% were female, and that the link was provided on the website, and then people were encouraged to share it. So a sort of snowballing sampling procedure, although the author of the study did not call it that. The survey was made up of questions that were created by the author. We have no idea where he got the thought process, or did he get any inspiration from existing research? We don't know. We don't know anything about validity or reliability. All we know is that they made up questions. The predominant age range of the respondents was 36 to 45, but he doesn't indicate, or she doesn't indicate, how many people or how many subjects fell within that range. And they said the second highest age group was 46 to 55. Again, we don't know how many in the sample fell into these categories. And then they reported for sexual preference. 79.5% reported that they were straight, 17% reported they were bisexual, and 3.5% reported they were gay. This is alarming for many reasons. One being that sexual orientation is being labeled a sexual preference. Another being that we have no idea how this was determined. Did people self-identify their sexual orientation, or were there certain questions and the author just made a conclusion based on how they answered questions? We don't know that. So there's actually a lot we don't know. And being that is the case, in that I know nothing about the author, where they come from, nothing about the methodology really, I would probably never report this statistic in a classroom or in something that I myself was writing. It does not seem reliable or valid, and I would be uncomfortable, and I feel that it's unethical to report it. So that's kind of the main message I wanted to give you guys regarding statistics in the media. There are some general things, I mean, knowing what you've covered in class, when you come across statistics in the media, you have to know the difference between an independent variable and a dependent variable. Because if somebody asks and you don't know, you don't feel so great about that. And so I always try to remember that the dependent variable is dependent on the independent variable, meaning that the independent variable comes first. It is the predictor variable, and the dependent variable is the outcome variable. Always helps me keep it straight. Have to know what a correlation means. You can't just, I have undergraduates that throw that word around, but if you question them, they really have no idea what it means. It just sounds fun to say. It's a relationship, and that's it. It doesn't establish causality. It only implies that there's some kind of relationship. And you actually can take a correlation and understand the strength of that relationship, although I don't believe that's something that this class gets into. So it does give you a lot of information, but at the heart, it's just a relationship. You have to know what the mean implies. You can't just use, the mean was blah, 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 blah. You have to understand that that is an average and that you can only calculate it when you're using continuous variables. Otherwise, it's meaningless. You can't calculate a mean on categorical variables. So if we have a categorical variable that is talking about hair color, and you see that the author in some newspaper article is publishing the mean for that variable, that's extremely problematic and a red flag. Probably there are other problems. Have to know that when comparing groups in a t-test or an ANOVA, what's really happening is you're just comparing means. So each of the groups, they have to be independent of one another, and they each have a group mean. And you're trying to find out, or whoever conducted the study is trying to find out, whether or not there are significant statistical differences in those group means. That's it. That's all that's going on there. Again, it's not causality. You're just looking at different numbers among different groups to see if they're higher or lower. You also have to know when something is over your head, and you need to look up more information. This happens to me a lot. It's not something that I'm ashamed of. It happens. I don't know everything. So every once in a while, something's reported, and I'm like, I got nothing on this. I don't know what this means. So it could be something I've learned in the past and forgotten, or it could be something I've never learned in statistics at all. Regardless, when I am in over my head, I don't try to pretend that I know what's going on. I dig deeper and try to understand. If I really just can't understand and don't get it, I say so. There's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you don't know. There is something wrong, however, with pretending you know when you don't. You could seriously mislead somebody or cause other additional problems. So just some more examples. Headlines from newspapers. These are just some things you see. A new study finds a negative correlation between cell phone use in class and GPA. Somebody looks at that. They know you've taken stats. So like, what does that mean? They're negative course. They're not related at all. What does that mean? And it's pretty common for people not to understand the difference between negative and a positive correlation. So it's your job to know that. This means that as one variable goes up in number, the other variable goes down. So as cell phone use goes up, meaning people are using their phones more, their GPA goes down. And that's a pretty just general understanding, but a lot of people don't get it if they haven't had statistics. Not only that, but it's easy to get confused. And that used to happen to me a lot when I would teach statistics. I'd sometimes have to have students say, wait, Dr. Moyer, is that right? And I'd stand there and go, no, I've got this mixed up. Easy to do. University of Washington study reveals that women have longer commutes to work than men. Okay, so somebody asks you about that. What does that mean? It's likely that women and men were asked to report how long their commutes were, and then an independent t-test was used to find out whether women or men had longer commutes, and it appears that women have longer commutes. So they spend more time getting back and forth to work. Findings from an ANOVA show that children living in urban areas are more violent on the playground than children from rural or suburban areas. This, I purposely use the word violent because it can be provocative and even triggering for some people when they see that word. If you are digging into the study, it might be likely that you find out that the authors are just using violent to describe whether or not children hit each other on the playground. And while that is a form of violence, it's not quite as serious as that term implies, and brings to mind pictures of children bringing guns or weapons to the playground. And probably what happened is a researcher just observed children on the playground and counted how many incidences they saw of any violent behavior or aggressive behavior, pushing, shoving, hitting, and then the children were divided up into, or maybe they observed in a rural setting, in a suburban setting, and an urban setting. And then they reported which group showed or evidenced more aggressive behavior. So breaking that down and letting people understand, particularly if it's from a reputable source and they've been doing research in this area and they're credible, and they report they have a literature review, they have hypotheses, etc., then you can explain this is probably what's going on. Makes you sound smart, because you are. Okay, then there is the issue of using statistics to support one's point of view, or what I like to call using statistics for evil, because sometimes that's what's going on. When you are reading a journal article, and I'm sure you've read many as a grad student, you have probably come across journals that list several different findings. And while that's all fine and dandy, as you're going through the results section, it's a little overwhelming, and then you just get to the discussion and the authors wrap it up and put it all together for you. It's likely, though, that every once in a while you find an article that has a finding that isn't consistent with the rest of the findings. And sometimes the authors will dig into this and explain that there was some sort of error that occurred, or the way they measured it, or something happened. But every once in a while, somebody takes the one finding that's counterintuitive to the rest, runs with it, and uses it to support a point of view that's inconsistent with all of the other research that's been conducted on the topic. And that, in and of itself, is legal to do. It's unethical, but it's not a total lie, if you understand what I'm saying. But if somebody was to dig into that research themselves, which you would do as an educated individual, you would find that, whoa, this is just one finding out of 40 they listed, and the authors even say they think they measured it wrong, which is why this came out this way. There is a pretty famous study now. The Regnerus study was published in Social Science Research in 2012. This was a study on the outcomes of children raised in same-sex households. 2012, before same-sex marriage was federally legalized in all 50 states, and so it was a very hot topic being argued in the Supreme Court. And Regnerus, I think it's Regnerus or Regnerus, it doesn't matter. I never can remember which way to pronounce it. He filed a brief with the Supreme Court arguing that same-sex marriage should not be legalized, and even had several researchers that supported his point of view sign the brief with him. Could be potentially damaging, right? Very serious. Some of the findings that children from same-sex households had more problems than children from straight or opposite-sex parent households, in regards to academics, to social interactions, psychological health, and behavioral issues. That's pretty flamboyant, pretty risky, pretty scary. After a year or even 2 years. I cannot remember exactly the time period. I should say that this finding goes against everything that every reputable professional organization in the social sciences has ever reported. So other research has refuted this and shown that children from same-sex parent households are not only just doing fine, they're actually often doing better than their counterparts from opposite-sex parent households when it comes to academics, psychological health, behavior, social interactions, etc. So this was weird. It's like an anomaly. Where did this come from? Well, several people reanalyzed the data, which is one of the reasons that you have to describe a study in complete detail so that somebody can replicate it and do it again and see if they get the same findings. There were several methodological problems with the study. I'll point out a few. It takes too long to get into all of them. You can look it up yourself. But over half of the subjects that were listed as coming from a same-sex parent household had never even lived with their parents' same-sex partner. So their parent had a same-sex partner, and they were adult children in most cases. They had never lived in that household. So how could you attribute an outcomes to having a same-sex parent household? How gay was defined. If a parent had ever dated somebody of the same sex, even once, they were classified as gay or lesbian. Also problematic. Dating somebody once and then never again, but dating only members of the opposite sex does not typically make one gay, nor do people tend to label themselves that way under those circumstances. So that was risky and ridiculous. Also, there were several instances where Red Canaris had used what we would refer to as outliers, data that was suspicious, basically, and really shouldn't have been included in the analysis. Most, if not all, social science researchers would not have included it. Here's a good example. One subject reported that he was 7 feet 8 inches tall. He weighed 88 pounds, and he had been married 8 times and had 8 children. I think he likes the number 8, but I mean, that's just not the kind of data that you would include. That's very strange. The weight and the height alone is enough to say, whoa, what's happening here? And that is usually something that you would exclude from further analysis, and you might explore any of those outliers that you excluded to find out what's going on, and you would talk about it, but you certainly wouldn't include that in the analysis. So that's just a few. There are a lot of problems, and the social science community, professionals in the community, not only refuted this study, there was a huge backlash against it because of the harm that it could cause and because of the implications of using this one study to say, hey, we shouldn't legalize same-sex marriage. So when it's used for a policy or law or something like that, it can be pretty serious. That's when it becomes so important to know your stuff, find your source, be especially wary when research is being used to support changes of some sort in law, policy, or rules. So use your power for good. Enjoy the feeling that comes with understanding statistics in the media. Look for opportunities to advance your knowledge and skill set. The more, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, but if you don't use it, you lose it. That is very true with statistics. However, you have so many opportunities to continue using your knowledge when looking at statistics reported in the media, because they're reported all the time. I hope that helps. I hope that this was enjoyable. I enjoyed doing it, and I'm available for questions if anyone does have any follow-up. My email is Moyer, Moyer, L for Lisa, so Moyerl at Winthrop, WINTHROP.edu. You can also just look me up under the faculty. I am in the College of Education there, in Family and Consumer Sciences. So, good luck and Godspeed, and use your statistical power for good.